Okay, Vine Church, welcome back to our marriage live stream. Thank you for joining us on this Monday evening or whenever you're consuming this. We hope you get a little something out of it. Remember, we're actually going through a little book, and a couple of you have ordered books that haven't gotten picked up, so if you need to do that at church on Sunday, they'll be here for you. But we're not doing the whole thing in the live stream, just little bits and pieces of it, but I think you'll get the picture as we kind of talk through this. Feel free to comment, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Facebook, and Kat will do her best to respond to all your comments because she loves you. Okay. Did you guys read through Genesis 3 at all? Did you do a little? Oh, you did your reading. Did you do your reading?
No, I did not.
It's because she has it memorized. She already knows
Right.
it.
That's right.
She's a preacher's wife, and as a preacher's wife, she knows. Okay, so this is for your benefit then.
Okay.
Genesis 3 is this kind of picturesque account of the first man and the first woman. Mm-hmm. And most believers have used this as a go-to example for how relationships are supposed to be. So we take the metaphor out of that story and we kind of drag those metaphors into real life and go, hey, it'd be better if it was like this, like how God originally designed it. Are you cool?
Yeah,
okay. All right, so one of the questions I wanted to look at with you guys was this fourth question, and it said, what immediate change does sin produce in a man and a woman? And it references verse 7. Can you go back real quick, Mike, and so we can see this? And verse 7 says, then the eyes of both of them were opened. They realized that they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So after they sinned, their eyes were open, they covered themselves. And then it asked this question, what immediate change does sin produce in the man and the woman? And besides the whole actual sewing figs, do you want to take a shot at what you think that symbolizes? What did you think of when you read this week? Did you think of did you place meaning upon this, upon the illustration of them sewing clothes together? What was the meaning you gave it?
That they were full of shame.
Okay.
Or they were trying to, I said this, but I don't know if after we started talking about it, it made sense, but it's like how we try to cover up our sin. They were trying to cover up their sin.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know. No, I mean, I think there's some of that too there. They're trying to cover up, definitely. What do you think?
Well, just my off the cuff.
Because you didn't do your homework.
Because I'm unprepared. I apologize. In the covering and the sewing the fig leaves, there's a separation.
Okay.
Between their bodies and God. And so what was once open or visible or uncovered is now there's a separation between God and the physical body.
Anything else you'd add to that?
No, I think that's shame. I think there was shame there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that too.
But think about it. It's not just they were covering up their bodies from God. They were covering up their bodies from
each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you said about the fig leaves being in between them, or before they were naked, that there's now another layer, if you will.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way, but that makes sense.
I think a lot of believers, well, at least in my experience with the church, we see that a lot, is that believers are afraid to share their sins with each other, even though we're told to do that. And so there's a level of covering and shame.
You want to confess anything? You can do it on the live stream if you want.
Not that comes to mind. Besides not doing my homework, but.
Okay, so let's push this into the marriage context, because this is really what you guys have kind of said is really what a lot of commentators, Bible teachers, scripture readers would come up with. They would say, don't you see that God created things without any division. There was complete openness, honesty, and connection, and like there was nakedness, and nakedness is a symbol for intimacy and like nothing keeping me from you. You know what I'm saying? And so then sin comes in, and now there's this first layer of division that leads to more layers of division, and that becomes a symbol that in the most intimate of relationships, which would be a marriage, it's hard to break through all of that stuff and get back to a place of real connection where there's nothing keeping me from you. Like there's a sense of real honesty, real openness, right? And so how do we practice certain things in the relationship that push us towards that real deep intimacy where there's nothing dividing us versus kind of just going with the flow where we know we'll drift back towards like these lives that kind of move further and further apart. Like, how do you do it? What are things that you're practically doing that make you more close and intimate and connected?
You say it. You say, I don't really feel close to you.
Okay, but that's a legit thing.
But you want to know the action?
No, but that is an action. Like, do you guys feel like you're communicating at that level where like, hey, I'm being super transparent with you. Like, I can say anything to you, and we can get through that.
Yeah, he says that to me, and I say that to him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She said he says that to you.
He'll say like, I don't feel close to you. I feel like you're like in another country, and I'm like, well, I am. Just let me go there for a little while. I'll be back. Not necessarily another country,
But let's stick on that for a second, because do you feel like she shuts down sometimes, like where she's just like kind of checked out?
Yeah, she'll get absorbed into her thoughts and her business and other goings-ons that she has her hands in the pot.
Okay. But is it like a mental dialogue that you're having in your own mind that kind of you check out and you're thinking about things? Do you sense that?
Well, I have other, possibly.
Okay.
I mean, but that doesn't mean that I'm like on purpose.
Yeah, I don't think she
distancing
realizes it.
myself from him.
Okay.
There are situations where it's like, let's say something is hurtful, and then it might take time to process to be like, this or the other hurt my feelings, and I just don't really feel close to you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Shut down. I'm gonna pout for a little bit. I'm gonna pout for a little bit.
It's not even that,
I do.
It's like you just gotta go through whatever. I mean, even if like it's a quick apology, there's still like a time that might have to, take place just to get back to normal. But I would say most of the time we just pick up like, oh, did you see, that red shirt? I don't know. You just pick up something natural, like, oh, what are we having for dinner? Oh, are we still going here? But that's something if it's not so serious, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of keep moving forward.
We were talking today about just like a specific example. We had lunch today, and we weren't really talking about this particular series over lunch, but we were talking about other things. And one of the things that came up was like how couples can hide things from each other, like, and that's a symbol of distance between them. I know you guys are acting, because you guys have a pretty good relationship, so you're acting like that's crazy, but that happens every now and then. And one of the things we were talking about was finances. Like that the number one leading cause of divorce in the United States is financial disagreement, financial argument, and one of the, I think the most extreme signs that things have gotten off track in a relationship is when you are hiding something from your spouse. Like you're purposely saying, I'm hiding this money, or I'm hiding this resource, or I'm hiding what I'm doing with this money from my spouse. Do you know what I'm saying?
She does that.
I have to.
She hides the donuts. She hides the donuts. She hides the, all the sweets. She's always hiding something.
She's hiding something.
No, it's
terrible.
more or less like if I have some cash, I do kind of like
Hoard it. Oh, she does the same thing. She does the same. We talked about it today. She's like, I don't have for you. I was like, girl, check your purse right now. I guarantee there's a bunch of cash in there.
But you know where it's at. I'm not hiding it. I'm keeping it safe.
It's not that you
But
brought it
you
up.
know.
That you mentioned that
Did you
had
hear how
it.
she just politically correct? I'm not hiding it. I'm keeping it safe.
You know exactly where it is. You're more than welcome to have it.
Oh my
But there's couples who have hold different secret bank accounts or who have separate bank accounts and hide crazy stuff. That's just, and then wonder why their marriage is,
Not working.
or why there's no trust or intimacy.
Well, I guess the question is, when does it become, you know, you guys have been married a while. So if we're talking like young couples and stuff, when do you get off the rails? Like, how does that first start to happen? Like, what prompts that you go, I'm going to take this step, and it's about putting up this barrier, right? It's about putting up this separation between us. Like, I'm keeping this from you. I'm either keeping this money or the fact that I'm going to create a lie about the time that I'm dedicating to work or another person or whatever it is. We just create this little gap, and then that gap just grows and grows and becomes more normalized. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I think that's what the metaphor of this passage is about, right? Is that now that we live in this world that's broken, it's easier to move this way than it is to maintain this unfettered openness between two people, right? I don't even know. I don't know if we can put that into words, but what makes it so easy to take that first step of like, pushing you away a little bit?
Well, I mean, think about it. Once anyone sins, I kind of think about it as like a crack in a wall that sin, and we've talked about this before, and then the longer it goes unattended, the crack grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The sin just, if it goes unattended, it can just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. People become more emboldened to sin, get away with sin, continue in sin, and become desensitized to it.
Yeah.
So
That desensitization, that like, I spend a lot of time talking to couples, and I have conversations with couples who, when they describe their marriage, like the face that I shouldn't make, you know what I'm saying, I should keep a stoic face, is like, what? Like it's more like inside I'm going, what? You know, but that's become their new normal, and they don't even realize that the intimacy isn't there anymore. They've got all of this distance between them, whether it's parenting or finances or sex or communication or whatever it is. They've put up all of these barriers, you know what I mean, to that connection point. So you guys have been through relationships that have gone bad too. When did you know it went bad? When did it first start? Like what starts down that road of like, you know?
For me, it was an empty bottle of Canadian Mist.
Okay.
And then I was like, okay, like, what's going on here? You know, it was no longer like social drinking. Then it became compulsive, and then it started affecting the family more so.
Yeah.
And then it was hid.
Right. It becomes a secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so then there's no trust, then the trust is broken, and then communication's broken. Then there's like an elephant in the living room you don't want to talk about.
Think about what you're just saying too, and think about like the concept of communication, right? Like couples start out usually, let's say early on, whether it's dating, relationship, and you feel like you can talk about anything. That's the beauty of like early relationship, right? You're like, we can talk about anything. This is great. Like we're communicating. It's so great. And you just can't, you look forward to like having the conversations and having and then all of a sudden you're 6 months in, a year in, 2 years. And at some point in one of those conversations, something went bad. And at some point you were like, I'm not bringing that up again. You know what I mean? Or we didn't resolve that. And it just became, that one little move became easier and easier just to reproduce and reproduce. It's like a virus. It just, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to with what this verse is saying. I mean, that the example you described, there's shame there. And so if a person in a relationship feels shamed, of course they're not going to bring that up, and then that's just going to, sin has a snowballing effect. And so the same way shame can snowball, I'm not going to talk about that. There's this disconnect, so it just gets bigger and bigger. I don't know.
No fun.
It's so weird because the more that you're talking about it, it's like I really don't think alcoholism is a sin, which is I think it's more like a mental illness.
Well,
So that's
let,
where it's
let me
like
give
a
you some other words.
whole
Let me give you some words and see if you agree with this. When I say this, I think you'll agree with it, right?
I don't know if mental illness is the right word either. But
Well, think about. Let me give you these words and see if this rings true for you. And we're talking in theological terms, so whatever. I get the fact that if you're in recovery or something, you might not totally agree with this, but think of this through. From a theological standpoint, there's a difference between you committing a sin, right? Sinful, like the acts of sin, and the results of sin, or the brokenness of this world, right? So, like, we would never call a disability or a mental disease or Lou Gehrig's disease. We wouldn't call that sin, but theologians would call it the results of sin in the world. Does that make sense? Like, hey, we live in a broken world, and brokenness happens physically, sexually, spiritually, mentally, and a whole bunch of things. That was never what God intended. So maybe it's hard to kind of put it in terms of the action of sin, but it made the results of sin. Does that make sense?
yes.
Yeah, sin's bigger than just the one little thing you do, the lie that you do. It's bigger than that, right? Like Paul would say, the whole world's waiting for God to redeem it and make it the way it was supposed to be. Like, we don't even realize it's more off than we think it is. Right? I don't know. We kind of got sidetracked there.
The comments just said, one person said constantly talking and communicating. The question we talked about, how do you
overcome it?
Yeah, kinda
Constantly
the same
talking and
things,
communicating.
yeah.
Have you ever gotten to the place where, like, you have to have the conversation, but it's like it's weighty. There needs to be a communication about something in the marriage, but it's just like, oh gosh, this is going to take a lot of effort, and it's easier just to be like, I'm just going to bed. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm just going to bed.
I'll send an email.
Do you send emails?
I have.
To Don, you send an email? That is beautiful. I would love to see one of those emails. How long are they? Really weighty. They're long.
It helped you sleep better.
So it's like almost like I just got to get this off my chest.
Pretty much.
That was a while
Do you
ago.
respond to the
It is
email?
what it is.
Do you respond to the email?
It is what it is.
Yeah,
He puts it in his
he
spam
tells me
folder.
not to email him. We should talk.
I said, let's not email. How about we speak?
We speak face to face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was a time when I was going to counseling, and I said, well, my counselor said I could email you. It wasn't even in reference to marriage counseling, really. It was,
But I think there's a beauty to that too, meaning that, like, I don't know if email's the best advice for couples, but I think the idea of like communicating is, like, even if it is an email, right?
Well, the one thing about email, when it's a written word, there's no emotion in there. It's just the facts, or this is how I feel.
Right.
So you don't have the intonation and
delete
the
a lot
emotion of
stuff
it.
before you send it.
And you can reread it and delete. No, okay, that's not important now. Or
We used to,
I don't know if she
our
did.
whole relationship was formed over texting. So there's a lot of truth to that. We're making fun of you, but there's a lot of, like, our whole relationship started over texting, like long texting threads. And then when we got married, she actually printed it all out, like a whole year of texts out. It was like, it's like, it's like a novel, right? And so there is a beauty just to like any form of communication, and there's a beauty of written form of communication because you get to think about what you're saying, right? The beauty of that. I don't know. I just think that we live in a world, I think for couples, we live in a world where if you do not do a certain number of healthy relational practices in your marriage, you won't get, it will not just sustain. It will not just keep. It's like milk. You know what I'm saying? It has to be refrigerated. It has to be worked on. It has to be, you have to be active in what you're doing in the relationship and healthy practices, or it will not, it's like entropy. It moves towards chaos.
It's sours.
It sours. It moves towards, it does. It does. And that's what this is saying, is that there is this thing in us now that we are more driven to separate than we are to be open with each other. We're more apt to be like, it's easier not to have the conversation. It's easier to keep this private. It's easier to hold this secret. It's easier to, you know, does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I don't think that if I do that, I don't do it for very long. I just don't do it for very long. I don't know if you do or not, but
No.
Yeah. I think young couples is what I usually end
I
up
think
spending a lot of
so.
time.
I think definitely, like, we both
Have enough life experience
have
and
been around the block enough to know, like, I don't know, days, it's just not worth it, wasting time like that. You know, to give the silent treatment for how long? What good does that do? I mean, I can remember one time when I was hurt so much that I didn't want to talk, like I couldn't talk yet. I don't even remember what it was about exactly, but I do.
I was like, sure you do.
But,
Just got to go to that box and open it up.
But still, it's just not worth it. You know? It's a heavy load to carry to the silent treatment.
But let me give you like another, like a practical example that we've already kind of talked about with the money. Most of young couples that are getting married today, and a lot, if there's a young couple watching this, even married couples, they'll be like, oh yeah, we do that, and they don't even think twice about it. Is they'll get married many times, because a lot of young couples are living together in advance. They'll get married and they'll keep 2 separate bank accounts, completely separate finances. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, so let's go over, I always say this, I look them both in the eye, I go, let's go over the facts. You want to get married before God, family, and friends, and say that you're going to be one emotionally, spiritually, yet 2 financially. Does that make sense to you? And they look at you like you're like a flying pig or something. They look at you like you're crazy. And I'm like, does it make sense? Like you're saying you want to achieve oneness, but you want this glaring thing in your life that's separate, that's the -- leading cause of divorce in the United States. You see what I'm saying? Like, you start practicing certain practices that are very, separating. And it's what we do. It's so ingrained now in our culture, in our society, people don't even think about it.
Which I think there's a question that I brought that up with, like, women having careers
Yeah.
and being leaders at home. I mean, at their jobs.
Right.
You know.
Someone said there may be a practical reason for split bank accounts.
Yeah,
We have a split bank.
listen, I think, look, I'm not saying, oh yeah, you might have to put your mic on. I'm not saying that you can't have to, okay, let me be clear.
You're talking about my business now.
Right.
I'm not saying you can't have 2 bank accounts and achieve oneness. I'm saying that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, hey, we have a business or we have this or some practice. I'm talking about, no, we just had 2 checking accounts. That's how we were pre-marriage.
Right.
And now we're married with 2 checking accounts and we're still splitting like the mortgage. Like, did you give me
splitting
your
bills.
half of the mortgage this week? No, you think, and you're laughing.
I'm
But I
laughing.
deal with that like every
Wow.
week with young couples.
That's
They're like,
incredible.
did you send your half of the bills over? And I'm like, what are y'all doing? Right? And they're living this like very separated financial world. And it'll be some weird excuse that like I always get, like, oh, well, we wanted to have 2 accounts because I wanted to be able to buy gifts and be surprised. And I'm like, well, you ain't gonna have too many gifts because y'all gonna live separate. Y'all ain't gonna make it, right? There'll be no need for gifts.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying there can't be a practical example if you're saying that, or I get it, right? Like I think at one point we had multiple accounts for different reasons too.
Yeah, I mean,
Probably
we have
because she was
a
hiding money,
couple-
but
Yeah, we have two bank accounts, but
Both of you are on them.
right, and I think what you're trying to say is, there's a difference when you have two couples, one living together under one roof, wanting oneness, and then being surprised that there's this separation when you're doing tit for tat over bills, or like you live in one house that you own together and you're splitting the mortgage. Like that's just, it's very hard to be one when there's separation really in anything, but finances are just so huge. That's just one example, but that's such a big thing.
no, I deal with that's probably the practical example that I deal with more often than not. And it gets harder as you get older. You know this? Like when young people, I can usually catch them and convince them in their 20s. Like, hey, you need to think about financial oneness. Like, you will not go the full run without achieving it. That may not be. You may have two accounts, but you have to achieve financial oneness. How you work that out, you got to work it out. But all of a sudden, you get in like your 40s or 50s, and things get a little more complicated. You got retirements and 401ks, and you got more money and all that kind of stuff.
Stuck in your
And they're getting married for the second time or whatever, and it went bad. You try to tell somebody like that, oh man, they look at it like a business decision. And then they'll be like, nah, thanks, Mike, appreciate the advice, moving on. And then they're back in like 2 years later talking about they didn't have the marriage they wanted to have and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, surprise, surprise, right? I mean,
But there's something very intimate though about talking about your money.
yes. Can you think of anything more?
It creates closeness, and it also creates peace because you've made decisions that you don't have to like wonder what's happening. Like if you spontaneously even do something, you even know if you've talked about it. Like, well, I mean, I relate a lot because Danny and Tiffany are like Mr. and Mrs. Dave Ramsey themselves,
Yeah.
But like I admire how they communicate about money.
Yeah. But think about it, right? That's what financial oneness is. Financial oneness, just because you have one account doesn't mean you've achieved financial oneness, just to
Right.
make sure you're clear on that too. Financial oneness is, hey, we're a team. Mine is yours. Yours is mine. We work together. We plan together. We reach goals together. We accomplish things together. It's all our resources that God gave us to steward. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about oneness. But that's if you're doing things that are actively working against that, it's like,
Yeah.
and we live in a world that's very tempting to do that, to do things that you don't realize they seemed innocent. It seems like a fig leaf, you know what I'm saying? But it's a separation. It's like, hey, this is dividing us. You know what I mean? The next thing you know, it gets easier to divide. And all of a sudden you're hiding money, and it's like you're hiding debt, you're hiding whatever it is from your spouse. There's this whole other life, and it took 20 years to get there, but you're there. So, okay, question number 2. Check this out. We'll pull that question up. How can fear, self-consciousness, or blame affect the quality of your relationship with each other? I changed it.
Yeah.
It said it said quality of relationship with God, but I changed it to each other just because I wanted to kind of like push the envelope on what we've been talking about. But how can fear, self-consciousness, or blame affect the quality of your relationship with each other? What do you think?
Oh.
What do you think?
Well, what we were talking about before, there's a natural separation that comes with fear and blame. If I feel I'm going to be blamed or judged or shamed from you, then I'm not going to be open and intimate, and
Is that what's going on?
I'll get out of here. It just, I don't know, affects the whole relationship. If you are self-conscious that your thoughts, desires, communication is not going to be received in a loving, God-honoring way.
Okay. What stuck out to you in that? Anything?
Blame.
Me too.
Blame jumps out at me big time.
Big time. Is that just a guy thing?
Maybe.
Were you looking at it because you feel like you can get blamed sometimes, or you're doing the blaming?
Probably both.
Okay, I feel like I get blamed.
Probably both.
I do. I think it's
Well, it's probably legitimate. Just throwing that out there.
Thank you.
it probably is.
Appreciate
I'm
the
not,
support.
I'm not denying that.
I mean, when you blame, make excuses, you're not owning up to your side of the relationship. You're not being responsible for your actions, your decisions, your thought processes, whatever that may be, and that's going to be detrimental
Yeah.
to your marriage.
Yeah. I just think like we're always trying to shift the blame. And when marriages go bad, it's this constant shifting of power, right, and responsibility. So you're constantly trying to make yourself feel like, well, I'm doing the right thing here. Let's blame you for the problems, right? Like, obviously this isn't working the way I want it to work. Can't be me, because look at me, I'm a great person. It's got to be you. And so then I'm focused on your shortcomings, like what you've done wrong, right? That's the blame game, right? Hey, let's focus on what you've done wrong. Instead of turning the camera on yourself and going, okay, what's your responsibility? That's a hard thing to do. What's my responsibility in this relationship? It's very easy to go, let me make a list. Like even the Bible will say, like, love does not keep records of wrongs, right? Because we're tempted to do that. It's like, okay, let me write down all the times you didn't take the garbage out, or let's write down all the times you didn't do this or that, or the whatever, I had to ask you twice for this, or last time with the kids, or blah, and it's blame, and it's driving this, because when you're constantly getting that from somebody, it's
They say fear, self-consciousness, etc. causes defense walls, not an openness. So a sense of defensiveness.
I think maybe it's fear of getting blamed.
Maybe. I mean, after you get blamed the first time, then there's a fear or self-consciousness of getting blamed again.
How do you approach something like, hey, we got to have a tough conversation about something I think you did in the relationship that's detrimental to the relationship, without blaming?
Carefully. But I don't think we've ever had that.
Something
I
that
can
you
think of.
did in the something that
Like you're concerned. You're like, hey,
that's detrimental.
yeah,
and
this
the
this
relationship's
this
gonna
hurt,
end.
or this was offensive, or this didn't work out, or I felt like you, whatever, like you overshot me in front of the kids, or whatever it is, right?
Okay.
Like, how do I approach that and have that conversation and go, hey, listen, remember when blah blah blah, and it be healthy and not just a blame.
I think keep it like, I felt this way. I just keep it as close as you can to yourself.
Like a
Instead of
personal.
like you.
Okay,
Like,
yeah.
You can't help but say you. Like, this hurt my feelings when you did this, and I appreciate and explain what it is, but then if you can say it nicely, just say, don't do it again.
Yeah.
If you can't,
So I think that comes with practice too. Having those tough conversations
Yeah.
and coming to someone in a loving way.
Have you had? I mean, can you remember a time like that where you had to have a conversation that was full of some of those things? Does something pop in your mind? What's a good one?
which one should I bring?
So
See that record of wrongs? She missed that part.
Gotcha. Have you had something like that though?
It was in reference to driving.
Oh, great. Okay, so tell us about it?
Oh, I will.
Okay.
My pleasure.
This is so great.
This is Memorial Day weekend, coming home traffic,
Okay.
and he's in the far left lane, and there's probably a dozen cars ahead of us, and they're all doing like 75, 80, 5 feet off of everybody's bumper.
Right.
We're in Atlanta.
And
Which is
we
like
were
the
not.
Indy
we were
500.
Just, we were just south of Macon. Don't talk right now. And all of a sudden, the front car just comes to like brakes completely. So every single vehicle.
It's like,
So all I heard was our car had to kind of go over into this lane where there was like a truck with a tractor on the back that just all I heard was that horn go, you know, the really loud, and then it like calms down, but you at first hear that really loud horn. And then, so he stopped, everybody of course stopped at some angle. Thank God the guy behind us didn't rear end us, but he was up at our gas tank.
Well, that's
when he
because
stopped.
I moved to the right, so he wouldn't rear end us.
So then all 10 of those 12 people in front of us, but literally I was just like done because I'm always asking him like, please don't do that. Please don't do this. Please don't do that. Like this makes me nervous. Like, you know,
Right.
it's like, if there's one thing, if I do die in a car accident, you'll know why, okay? Just saying.
She was driving.
So
good.
and on the same trip on the way, actually, I needed to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
And he was like, but all the trucks I just passed will get ahead of us. And I'm like, you just really said that. Okay. I guess I'll just sit here and pee in the seat. But that was one time where we went off to the side of the road, and the other thing is I stopped at like everything I wanted to stop at. Like we stopped at that. What's that place?
It's your story.
You know, in Georgia, that place where they have like they do have nice clean bathrooms.
Oh, yeah.
And they have the peach jelly and all
Yes.
that. Maybe you don't go to Georgia as much as we do, but go through Georgia. And I was like, and I'll be darned. From here to Kissimmee, I'll find something at every exit to do.
Punishment. You're pulling over
Punishment.
every exit. Well,
No, but it was like literally I saw my life flash before my eyes.
so do you talk about it right then?
It wasn't a conversation. I
So you
did
just-
say something about it.
But you're just upset at that point. You're
like raging.
raging upset. So how do you approach it later, or did you ever approach
I
it
was
later?
very quiet. And
Okay.
then I sent him an email.
Are you kidding me?
I did send him an email.
That is beautiful.
And
I love this email idea.
I actually gave the law for driving behind somebody and
You
how
gave-
far the space
You
is.
gave the sheriff, you gave the Orange County Sheriff a dissertation on the law. That's a great plan. How'd that go over?
Delete.
You did not. You did.
Do you ever read my emails? Yeah.
But hold on.
So,
okay.
anyway, there is another side of this story.
Yeah.
He's
Yes,
gonna tell
there
you what
was
a
a
great
near
driver
accident.
he was. 'Cause he
Okay, but
avoided-
hold on. Who cares about the driving? Let's talk about the relational component, because this is the part that I don't hear. You send the email, and is that more just cathartic for you, or are you hoping to get some sort of communication out of this that you feel like ties you back together?
I was.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Is this more just like an outlet, like I got to get this off my chest, or is this more like your attempt of like, hey, I sense the
No, I
frustration
needed
between
to get it off my chest.
Okay.
And I was probably, that's probably one of the times in my life that I could say I was like furious.
Right. So that's more of like, that's not a I mean that's a great story. Don't get me wrong, that's a fantastic story. I'm gonna remember it for the rest of my life.
Well, I'll think of another one.
But that's not, I mean, you know, at that moment, you're just, that happens in every relationship. You're angry, but the email is not really like, hey, I'm wanting to restorative. It's more of like, I just got to get this off how frustrated I was, right? And like, I'm leaving that for you to deal with. Like you should probably apologize for being a knucklehead driver, but it's not necessarily like, hey, I'm trying to just like get us close with all this distance between
No,
us.
I wasn't trying to do that with the email. No, I wasn't. At that time, no, I
It
wasn't.
was the blame thing.
But how do you get it? how do you feel like, because here you sit today, obviously, you would say we're in a pretty healthy marriage. How do you make sure that doesn't become more and more distance, that frustration about that moment?
She drives.
No, like, I do remember him saying, yes, you're right, and
Oh, okay.
he'll actually be driving now and be like, am I doing okay? Like, he'll ask me that.
Okay.
Are you comfortable?
Like, he'll ask me, am I doing okay? Like, if we're on, like, a long road trip or something like that.
There's just
No, but
driving's a touchy subject.
Yeah, but hold on. That's a great example. Like, you just said something that sounds simple. I think most couples don't get this. I have this conversation constantly with couples. And couples who are doing, like, great. Like, say if I say rank your relationship between 1 and 10, right? 10 being the best. I have couples that'll say 8, 9, 10, right? And I say, well, have you ever been to a class? You ever taken a small group? You ever done that? And they'll say, no, no, no. And they think it's just happening. Like they got lucky. Like it's just the lotto. And I'm always like, no. If you give me time, I guarantee I can pull it out of you. It's not the lotto. You're doing certain things that are healthy relational practices. They may be coming natural to you, but they are actual things you're doing to make the relationship good. It's not just the lotto. You know what I mean? And so like when you say, oh, I actually acknowledged that, hey, okay, not my best moment.
Right.
I actually acknowledge in the future, like, I care about what you think. How are you doing on this? But those are all active things that you could have just been like, you know, forget you. I'm going to drive the way I want. I'm a man, damn it, blah, 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 blah. That went out on the internet. That's great. But you know what I'm saying? You could have done that too. And I run into guys that do that. And then they're like, I don't understand why my relationship's bad. Right? Like, I'm not thinking of, you know, they just like proud in the moment. But those are actual things that make the relationship much more intimate, much more balanced, much more considerate. You agree?
Yeah, I agree, and I think just from what I've seen and even our experience, thinking and expecting the best from your partner.
Yeah.
The most successful couples that I would consider, they do that. They think the best from their spouse in those heated moments. Not, my spouse is doing this to me, they're doing this to XYZ, annoy me, whatever. Or you use example, if, you know, a husband comes home late from work. Like
Right.
the wife thinks the best. Oh, maybe they got stuck in traffic, or they, you know, had a late phone call and not.
If your first
Doom and
thought is
gloom.
they're probably cheating, we're in a bad situation in a marriage.
Well, not
No,
just
but
that,
you're
but-
laughing, but that happens, right? If your first thought is negative of your spouse's actions that are either unexplained or hurtful or frustrating, if your first thought is they're doing this to me,
It was intentional.
it's intentional. They're planning this. You know what I'm saying? If that's your first thought many times, then usually that's a sign that there's more distance than you think between the two of you. Does that make sense?
I mean, I may be easily annoyed or frustrated at something
That's
you
an
do
understatement.
that you do or don't do, but after we communicate
I
about
dropped
it,
the fork on my plate today at lunch. And what'd you say?
I
She
think you
goes,
said
really? I was like, I'm sorry.
It was so quiet in there.
True story.
But I can be easily annoyed or frustrated, whatever the case may be. But when I really take a step back and think about it, it's easy to think the best about you. I know he's not doing this to me or doing this to annoy me intentionally. It's much easier to communicate about it, move on if you know and believe the best about your spouse, I think.
You said.
You go ahead. No, go ahead.
You said expect the best, and this is probably going off target, but expectations from your spouse can be detrimental.
Well, yeah, not expecting things of him, but let me see if I can rephrase that.
I understand what you're saying.
Believe the best.
Believing
the
yeah,
best.
No,
but
what you
yes,
said
you're
made sense,
correct.
but I just took from that
Yeah.
expectations as well, and that
Yeah.
could be a
Yes,
detriment.
I think that's a huge thing too that you see in a lot of couples is either the wife or the husband expect things out of their spouse that their spouse was never intended to fulfill in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We got to wrap it up for today, but last thing, Have you ever had this happen to you? Since we're talking about traffic and driving today, thank you, Donna. Have you ever been griped at? Not yelled. Yelled at's not the right term. Mad.
I've ever
Has
yelled
your
at
spouse
you.
ever been mad at you about how slow you drive?
Never.
Okay, because that happens to me.
No, there's no
That's
happy
true.
medium. He's either too fast or too slow.
I follow.
And when you're too slow, you're literally on the phone, texting, eating ice cream, and looking all around. That's why you're going too slow.
in the left lane.
So exactly. So tell the whole story.
She's always like, you're going too slow. What? Who goes too
You're
slow?
looking around, waving to strangers. Like, who does that? It's just. Yes, driving is a touchy subject. Thanks, Donna.
Way to go.
Very much so. Like I don't take the right streets because there's certain lights that rotate quicker
Yes.
than others, and I should have turned that way. Then I could have gone down 2 blocks, and I could have gone out there and turned right, and I could have been.
Well, most accidents happen at intersections, so let's add
Quick.
10 of them to our trip.
Okay, and we really nailed it for today. I think you've gotten the most important parts about this particular series. We're not sure what you've learned, but okay.
Oh gosh, that's funny.
All right, so next week we'll be back again. You guys are off next week.
No, we're here next week.
Oh, you're coming back next week? Oh,
2
okay.
weeks from now.
Yeah.
2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, they're off. Okay, we'll have new couples in. If you'd like to join us as one of the couples that comes in to talk a little bit, we'd love to have you on for one of these weeks. Donna can't be with us. Blessings on your travel in 2 weeks. But thanks for tuning in. We love you. We mean it. We'll see you Sunday. Peace.